I'm trying to hold my breath, let it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. You set off a dream in me, getting lost.
Okay, good morning to everybody. I see we still have lots of people joining in. So just we'd like to kick off. We did wait an additional 5 minutes for people to join. I just want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us on our Safetember webinar. I suppose this is the new normal now, everything being virtual. We still have to observe a few protocols, and I just want to take you very quickly through a few rules. So this is a SIOSH CPD 1 accredited webinar, and I'm going to ask a big favor to everybody not to clog up the chats. If you want to find out any questions about the accreditation, you can contact SIOSH directly, or you could drop us an email at FEM. You could email inquiries@fema.co.za. You'll see it on your screens in front of you. It's not SACBCMP accredited, so I want to state that up front. And we do not give out certificates of attendance. There you will notice that there is a chat function. I'm going to ask you to please put your questions down on the chat function. We have quite a long program. And from an ergonomic point of view, I trust that you're all comfortable, that you acquaint yourself with all the exits wherever you are sitting. And we're going to try and get through our program in the allocated time. So if you have any pertinent questions, if you post it onto the chat, we might not get to all the questions, but what we will try and do is try and pull out as many as we can, post it to the speakers. So I'll be monitoring the chat throughout, and I'll make notes on questions. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over for the official welcome to our CEO, Mrs. Ndibuo Manyonga.
Herman, thank you very much for that. Good morning to everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our Safetember webinar. For those of you who might not be familiar with our organization, we as FEM provide workmen's compensation to the construction industry in terms of the COID Act. We've been doing so since 1936, and we are licensed by the Department of Employment and Labor to do this work alongside the compensation fund. So if you're a company within the construction industry, you have a choice of either getting your cover with FEM or with the compensation fund. So more than 5,000 construction companies have entrusted us with providing them with this cover, and that spans approximately 300,000 employees. So in terms of Safetember, maybe just a little bit of background on the campaign. So Safetember is our flagship campaign as FEM that aims to shine the light on health and safety within the construction industry. We started the campaign in 2015, and it's grown from strength to strength, mainly as a result of very strong support from the construction industry, including industry bodies as well. And the reason why we initiated this campaign was just an acknowledgement of the fact that the construction sector is a high-risk sector. I mean, we see it within our own base of clients, where, on average, we are seeing anywhere between 8,000 and 8,500 accidents reported on an annual basis. I think it goes without saying that one accident is one too many. And sadly, we also see fatalities related to some of those accidents. So we wanted to really do our bit to rally the industry stakeholders to say, let's work together towards zero harm, which we think is definitely possible and doable. And indeed, we owe it to construction employees to join our efforts to ensure that it can become a reality. So every year we look at the trends across our book of business in terms of assessing what the main causes of accidents are. And then we focus our topic on the basis of that. We have dealt with motor vehicle accidents before, but because of the seriousness of the cause, in terms of issues such as fatalities that arise out of motor vehicle accidents, and indeed the other costs as well, we felt that it is important that we focus on motor vehicle accidents again this year as well. But this year is also an unprecedented year in terms of the challenge that has come with COVID-19 that has affected both the livelihood and well-being of everyone, including employees within the construction industry. In July this year, we hosted 2 webinars focused on COVID-19 and the construction industry, but based on feedback that we've received in terms of interactions with our own policyholders and clients, we thought it's worthwhile while we have everybody's attention to just touch on that topic again, and in particular looking at COIDA and COVID-19. So we will touch on it a little bit before we get into the main focus for today's webinar, which is motor vehicle accidents. Without further ado, it's also my pleasure to welcome our panelists of speakers for today. And I have the honor of just giving you a brief background on each. So our first speaker will be Jacqueline Mahlangu, and she will be the one that focuses on COIDA and COVID-19, and the rest will focus on motor vehicle accident. Jacqueline is FEM's National Claims Manager. She holds an LLB, and in addition has got qualifications in nursing and occupational health and safety. She has more than 25 years experience in occupational health, serving in different health and safety forums, like the Railways Safety Regulator and the Compensation Fund technical structures. We also have Herman, who is also today facilitating the webinar and really driving it. And Herman is FEM's Marketing and Communications Manager. Has been with us for 10 years. He's also a member of our Health and Safety Committee. He's a chartered financial planner and is currently completing his master's in construction management. We've got Eugene Herbert. Eugene is the managing director of Master Drive, which is an advanced driver training organization. Master Drive has been helping drivers improve their standards of driving for more than 20 years. He also serves on the board of several NPOs whose primary focus is road safety. His thorough understanding of why people drive the way they do allows Eugene to help drivers avoid these negative habits. A philosophy that Eugene believes in is that if every driver dedicated themselves to driving responsibly, we could reduce both road fatalities and use South Africa's resources for more constructive purposes, which is a philosophy I completely agree with. We then have Jacques Erasmus, who is the Group Health HSEQ Manager at Frankie, a Keller company, which also happens to be a client of FEM. And Jacques has 25 years experience in the civil engineering industry. The last 15 years of this focused on health and safety. He graduated in health and safety, and he's a chartered member of SIOSH, actively involved in promoting road safety within the construction sector. Really honored to have all of them here today to share some their insights and expertise, and to give off their time in that regard. Without further ado, I'm happy to hand back to Herman to facilitate the rest of the webinar.
Okay, thanks for that, Ndebo. As Ndebo mentioned, there is a slight change to the program. So we've included Jacqueline Mahlangu, who's our National Claims Manager, who's actually the expert here when it comes to claims. And she's going to take us through COVID-19, through the claims process, and then share a few statistics with us. So I'm going to hand straight over to Jacqueline.
Good morning, everyone. I will be sharing information in respect of COVID-19. And I must say that COVID-19 being new in our field, it is very challenging. We all learn as we go. And we just need to share a screen. I'm going to share some of the challenges that we come across as FEM in respect of COVID-19. And it is important that all of us comply with the requirements of the compensation fund. So thank you very much once more. I just want to advise that one of the key things, so basically I just want to say with COVID-19, when we went into level 5 in March, the compensation fund released a regulation in March whereby it was intended to be classified as an occupational health disease. COVID-19 was classified to be as an occupational health disease. And subsequently, with time as the practical experience in the industry, they reviewed their regulation in June and released more information. You shall see on here that they have the requirements in order for us to accept a claim as a COVID-19 claim. Firstly, it must comply with the out of and in the course of employment. Normally, I would like to explain and line up what I mean by out of and in the course, because that is normally very confusing when people submit their claims. Out of the course of employment, it means that it's something that happened in the workplace, not necessarily directed to your occupation or the work that you are doing. Something, for instance, like a bomb in the workplace, you get injured, it will be out of the course of employment. Or you are traveling, you were placed somewhere and you get an accident, then it will be out of the course of employment. You were pursuing the interest of the employer at the time of injury. In the course of employment, it is very simple. It means that you are a machine operator, you cut your finger, then that accident happened in the course of your employment. The second requirement in terms of the regulation is that there must be a source identified in the workplace. In other words, we should be able to identify a person that infected you with COVID-19. So what we are saying is that normally you cannot come and say, you know, I was working around people with COVID-19, therefore I have COVID, because that can also happen in the public place, public transport, lift clubs, you can get COVID from that. So we must be able to identify, maybe you are sharing an office space and the person that you are sharing an office with had COVID. Therefore, when you go and test, you are positive, it will be taken as the cause of your disease is identified and it is known. There must be a close contact. This is very important. People normally they submit and say, we were all together in a meeting, but we need to know that were you sitting in a room and was there enough ventilation in that room? Close contact, did I speak to you? And close contact, we don't mean speaking to a person passing by. We mean actually talking to a person for at least 10 minutes or more, because the quantity of the virus also is taken into consideration to be able to infect a human body. The occupation must be an inherent requirement of the job. This relates mostly to the people that are working in hospitals, the people that are working with mortuaries, and the people, you know, normally that are working in clinics, occupational health nurses and doctors. That is an inherent requirement of their job. So in such cases, we are not even going to ask who the source is. We are likely to accept this claim. There must be a chronological exposure and workplace symptoms. In other words, from the time we have identified your source to actually the time that you get infected, there shouldn't be more than 21 days lag on that, because the virus after some time it becomes dormant. So you can't get a person who's infected this month and then next month around the 20th or the 30th you come and identify that person as a source. It's actually, we're looking at the time lag between the person that is identified as a source and the person that is submitting a claim. The other part that actually was reviewed is that any employee, regardless of an occupation, the employer must investigate and submit a report and submit a claim. In other words, it is not up to the employer to determine whether you've got COVID-19 out of the workplace or in the public sector or at home. that claim must be submitted. FEM is the one to check and determine that actually it is work-related. In that case, there will be forms that you'll find on our website that will address those questions, and we should be able to identify who the source is. The additional requirement that we find that are very important when you submit the claim is that there must be a nexus between COVID-19 claim and the workplace. In other words, there must be a relation between your work out of, in brief, it goes to out of, and the workplace. So we often get claims that to say, no, the employee contracted, but he was near a person that was positive, but the person is not identified. It is very difficult for us to adjudicate on that claim. So normally what we'll do, we'll inform the employee that, you know, we need this outstanding information, and if the information is not forthcoming, we are likely to finalize the claim, not to repudiate the claim, but to finalize the claim. The traveling must be work-related. This is very much, you'll see in my subsequent slide, that I have addressed traveling per se, because in construction industry, I'm happy that the topic today is motor vehicle accident. You'll find that construction industry people are grouped in and put in a vehicle to go to a site. We are likely, and when we do have a policy holder where we found that 10 of those people had COVID-19. So in that case, we are likely to collectively accept the claim because it is very difficult to identify who is the source in that situation. People's symptoms are not manifesting in the same way, and the incubation period varies from one person to the other. The other point that the traveling must be work-related is what we call positional risk. In other words, you more especially with health and safety officers, they move from one place, they go to Limpopo, the company organizes an accommodation for them, they sleep over there. In that case, it is a positional risk. The employee is not in control of his environment, and we don't know the measures that the company, the hotel, the PNB, they took to avoid COVID-19. So when that person comes and presents with symptoms of COVID, we are likely to accept. The other part is that the employee must have been performing any work in pursuance of the employer's business. In other words, irrespective of the type of work that the employee is doing, as long as we can identify the source in the workplace, and as long as it's an inherent requirement of the job, we are likely to accept that claim. And that claim must also comply with Section 65 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. In other words, the occupational disease. We only accept a claim when the test comes back positive. And in my subsequent slide, I will be telling more of how we go about payment of those claims. But it must be the date of diagnosis is the date that the employee submitted the specimen, and the specimen came back positive. That is when we say the employee has got COVID-19. But when the employee presents with symptoms and is not tested, we cannot accept that as a claim. So I have noted here that there are no benefits for unconfirmed cases, contacts who are self-quarantined. In other words, when we pick up a person who is COVID-19 positive and the other group is told to self-quarantine, that unless we've got positive pathology results, we are not liable for any of that claim. We have seen that companies are submitting contacts and then the claim comes back negative, the pathology results come back negative. Though in that case, we don't consider that a claim. We only consider a claim if the results came back positive. So in this slide, I have outlined some of the industry-specific challenges that we have seen since the lockdown and since the emergence of COVID-19. What is most common is that with the construction company, people, especially the technician, they take it an assistant, they go in a company bakkie to a site to go and fix something. So I have stated before that those are the cases that we are likely to accept unless maybe there were 3 individuals in the car and the one started being positive and subsequently the other 2 became positive. The first one that started being positive is likely not to be accepted. And the other 2, we assume that they contracted the disease as a result of the first person. So in that case, the other two will be accepted. Having said that, it is very important when we report a COVID-19 case to actually give a list of all the people that worked in close contact with that person. So what happens is that, because as I said, incubation period differs, we will save the contact list, and subsequently, if within 21 days, one of those employees come back testing positive, we are likely to refer to the contact list and accept the claim instead of going back to the company and asking who was the source. We just look at the contact list and say it's within 21 days, therefore we are going to accept. And the other challenge is the accommodation organized by the company. That part I have already touched, that we consider that a positional risk, especially with the drivers. There are policyholders that there's a policyholder that's got a lot of drivers, and if they sleep over somewhere and they contract COVID around the same time within 21 days, we are likely to accept that claim. Therefore, it is important when you submit a claim for the traveling or the driver to indicate areas that the driver has visited about 3 weeks before they actually presented with symptoms. So that is that. The point with accommodation, again, is the transport arranged by the company. This is not a tautology, but basically we find that, we've got buses that belongs to the company that goes pick up the employees, and the employees that are in a bus and they are transported to the workplace or to the site. In that case, once more, it is very difficult to pick up who the source is. And we are likely to say, give us a list of the people that goes in that bus, and anyone that presented positive within 21 days, we are likely to accept, because it is a transport that is arranged by the company. And then the other challenge is the site project managers and health and safety personnel who goes into meetings and in boardrooms. The very common one, we find that, with individuals, especially executive or managers, they go into the boardroom and they've got sometimes this mentality that, no, we are safe in the boardroom. But we have seen that that is actually where most of our cases are coming from, that they went for a project, they discussed the project in the boardroom, and subsequently all the people that were in the boardroom tested positive. Now, the challenge with that is that you find that some of the people that were in the boardroom, they are not the employees of your company. It becomes very difficult to identify who infected you in that case. And another challenge that we've got is lack of contact tracing and reporting. We have observed that there is selective reporting of claims to FEM or to the compensation fund per se. We urge the industry to please report every case and the contacts, who are the people that were working. So we find that they report a case, but they don't tell us the contact. It's very difficult then to adjudicate on such a claim. On this slide, I've also put on the health challenges, which I think it is very relevant to the industry and to us as health and safety personnel to have an understanding, because we are actually the ones ultimately that dealing with the injured employee. One of the key problems in the health sector is that they want a testing. Some of the doctors request the employee to test before they come to their rooms. We need to note that the doctors' consulting rooms are taken as a business. So it is upon the doctor to ensure that the environment is in compliance with COVID-19 safety regulation. Therefore, FEM, compensation fund, even RMA will not pay for consultation, just a consultation to go into the doctor's rooms. Doctors must take measures to ensure that they are safe in terms of COVID-19. We have seen doctors that come around and say, I need you to do a test before, otherwise we are not going to see the patient. In that case, we are likely to speak to the doctor. If he still insists that he needs a test, it's either the employee use the medical aid but FEM will not carry the costs thereof, or alternatively will look for another doctor who is able to see the employee. And the second one is testing for COVID-19 pre-hospitalization or a procedure. What happens in this case, FEM is likely to pay for this pre-hospitalization test. maybe now people come and say, but why are you not paying for consultation rooms, but you pay for hospitalization? Hospitalization, there are other patients whose immune system is very weak, and also they will need to take care of the health personnel. The environment in itself, it's classified as an inherent risk environment where employees, even if you are just walking in the hospital, somebody can sneeze or cough, and generally in layman's terms, we say the germs are all over. So we are likely to pay for that pre-hospitalization. And also in the interest of the employee, that when they go into surgery, they are not compromised, their lungs are not compromised. It is very important. However, we say the testing must take place 72 hours, not more than 72 hours before the actual procedure. The employee contracting COVID-19 whilst in hospital, apology for spelling there on whilst. This happens very often. You find that the employee is injured, get to hospital, he tested negative, and while in hospital, they come back and say the employee is tested positive now for COVID-19. FEM is likely to pay for that test and for the treatment of COVID-19 when the employee is already in hospital, because we are the ones, injury on duty is the one, it's more like a positional risk. Injury on duty is the one that made the employees to end up in hospital. And also one of the challenges is lack of clear guidelines on complications. We do know every day, you watch the TV, you find that people present with different post-COVID-19 complications. And what we are urging is we've got a letter that goes to the company when a claim is submitted to advise them that should this employee come back or experience any respiratory, heart, complications are not conclusive. We still there's still baby steps towards this. The research is still ongoing, but we're saying, however, if we find that the employee tested positive, we have accepted the claim, and now the employee present with other symptoms, which can be suspected as related to COVID-19, we urge you to contact us, and we are the one to determine whether it is related or not. The other challenge is that we have found that there is no tariff structure for COVID-19. In other words, we don't have the tariffs, the quiet tariffs for COVID-19. However, there are reasonable costs, the ranges, where we find that the testing is about $850 with other institution. Other institution is 1,400 per test. So basically, in this case, we will pay as claimed. It is a new virus that is posing a challenge in management. How to manage COVID-19, it differs from one institution to the other. Therefore, we are likely to go with whatever treatment is presented on our desk in this case. Now, the challenge again, when it comes to adjudication of claims, now the claims it's at FEM and we need to adjudicate the case. One of the big challenges that we found that the company will come and say, I'm just going to make an example to say Jacqueline is the source and he infected Maria. But when you look at the test results, the specimens were collected the same day. The result came back positive the same day. So in that case, it is very difficult to adjudicate on these cases when you say the other one is the source. We are likely to go back to the company and say, please indicate in terms of sickness, presentation of signs and symptoms, who started first, And then the other problem is that we get a lot of incomplete FEM specific COVID-19 forms, which are available on the website. People, policyholders, they just download from the compensation fund website and submit. But I just want to state that the compensation fund forms are actually not conclusive. They are not detailed enough for you to make an informed decision, because they were designed, and rightfully so, when the COVID-19 started, and the understanding then was that you have to be traveling somewhere overseas to have COVID-19. Subsequently, we saw that it is not the case. So please, I urge the policyholder to download the forms on our website and submit. The risk assessment forms are not completed. This, I have noted there, section 56, the company are very reluctant to submit risk assessment forms, which I do have a slide on it. But I just want to indicate that risk assessment forms, it is from the Department of Labor. It will assist the policyholder should the employee come and claim negligence as a result of the employer's non-compliance to COVID-19, which is Section 56. In that case, if they come and claim negligence and they can prove and you don't have this form completed, that you educated your employees on COVID, we are likely to accept that and submit for the claim. The other challenge is that we've got poor reporting from the employers. The employers, you find that, you know, when you go and do policyholder visit, you find that the employer says, no, I had 10 COVID-19 cases, but no, only 2 were work-related. It is not up to the employer to decide. I urge the employers and the policyholder to submit all, irrespective of who they got it from, because you will see in terms of the stats that it is affecting, and we need to report to the compensation fund because we are regulated by them on the cases that we are accepting and the cases that we are repudiating and the reason for repudiating. And then the other thing is that the challenge is that the index and the source are normally reluctant to submit pathology report. You know, when we identify the person as a source for the infection, sometimes we do get the person not interested in submitting the pathology report. In that case, we request the employer to name the person that they suspect is the source and give us a story that we have tried to get pathology report. This employee is refusing, so that we can adjudicate on the claim. The form that I was talking about, there it is the worker COVID-19 risk assessment form. It indicates, it's basically the risk assessment form that indicates or confirms that the employer did carry out precautionary measures as prescribed by the compensation fund and the Department of Labor. I'm not gonna dwell on much. I just wanted you to see this risk assessment form that the employers are very reluctant to submit. So if you need the forms, this is the slide that indicates that you can actually get it from our website. The information is there, and you can also submit your claim to firm registry at fema.co.za. Now, I just briefly just want to touch on the administration of an accepted claim. How do we administer? When it comes to testing, the initial testing, normally it will be paid by the employer or by the employee. And then when the test comes back positive, we normally reimburse the employer, who will in turn pass it on to the employee if it was paid by the employee. But we normally ask for the receipt before we can reimburse the employee accordingly. It is easier for us to reimburse the employer and the employer pass it on to the employee, just to improve on our turnaround and to make sure that the employees are not compromised. And then normally follow-up testing according to the national regulation is no longer compulsory, but we're saying for the interest of the employer and the employee himself, if there is a follow-up, the employer requires that the employee test before they come back to work. In that case, we are going to pay for that test. Temporary total disablement, the wages, the TTD, in simple terms, wages, it is limited to a diagnosis for 30 days post the results. In other words, if the employee is booked off for 30 days after they tested positive, we will pay. Now, the challenge on this one is you find that the employee went on self-quarantine for 3 days and thereafter they went for testing. So the challenge is the first 3 days is not accounted for. In that case, we're saying the FEM will reimburse because, of course, the employee was presenting with symptoms. We will reimburse the first 3 days that the employee was staying at home. You might find that when we reimburse now, it goes to 33 days instead of 30 days because we count in the 3 days before the employee tested, went for testing, or while waiting for the results, which is very important. The results, sometimes they take about 72 hours before you can get them. If the employee is hospitalized, we pay for treatment covered as any other claim. If the employee is self-quarantined and is unconfirmed, the employer is responsible for the payment in terms of sick leave and national regulation. When it comes to impairment, we can only determine, that's the complications that I spoke about. We can only determine that 3 months post-COVID recovery. So that's when people start manifesting, sometimes with short breath, sometimes others, they've got chest pain, others, they don't have energy. So we will look at that and we'll pay for the impairment. In terms of death benefits, it's like any other claim. We pay the dependents and the children. It doesn't differ as long as we can be satisfied that the employee died as a result of COVID-19 in the workplace. So these are the contact details of FEM. If you've got any inquiries, you can phone inquiries at fema.co.za. The office hours is of 359-4300. And we take pride that we've got a 24-hour service at FEM. So if you phone after hours, even if you phone 4300 or you phone 43333, then it will ring for some times and it will be directed to one of the manager's cell phone, the manager who is on call. And the manager is likely to assist you if there's any problem, even with a normal injury on duty, you can phone. But what I need to stress here, you need to be a little bit patient because you'll find that it rings and it stops while it's diverting and it rings again. Therefore, you will get someone that is attending to you. Of interest, I just displayed the stats that we submit weekly in terms of COVID-19. You shall see that these are the stats that as represented as at the 25th of September. And it is interesting to note on the stats that the Gauteng actually is leading. And if you look at the number 136, it's actually even more than 50% of the total number of COVID cases that we've got. We have 245 cases at the present moment, reported cases. And for me, it is a worrying factor because with the level 2, when construction industry was open, we were expecting an upsurge of the claims, but instead we are seeing a downtrend. I will explain, it's not reflected here, but what happened is that initially, the first few weeks, we had about 24 claims. 2 weeks after then, it was an upsurge. We had about 48 claims, which was showing that, you know, there's activity now in the industry. And thereafter, we are seeing a downtrend, which actually, if you can look here, we've got last week, you only have 9 new claims that were reported. But when we visit the policyholder, we get a feeling that there is just more claims, more COVID claims than it is reported. So we are followed by KwaZulu-Natal we are followed by Western Cape with 32, and then KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape on the third, they are third with 24 cases each. If we look at the 245 cases, out of these 245, there's 105 that we have accepted cases because of the either inherent requirement of the job or the source was positively identified and we know the contact, that there was a close contact with the source. And then we've got 111 that are repudiated. With time, you will see that this number might go down because when the 29 that are pending, when you get the results, we will either accept or repudiate. But when we repudiate, sometimes after some time, the employee will come and say, I've got information, this is where I got the COVID-19 from. We are likely then to relook at that and accept the claim. Having said that, I hope I have tried to cover the challenges that we encounter. And thank you very much. We will address any questions as per program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. I think that was very informative and very important, especially through this time. I don't see any pertinent questions, so I'm going to skip on the questions for now. And what I would just like to encourage everybody is to log on to www.fem.co.za. You'll see it on all our slides. We are recording the webinar and there will be a link available for you to download. Okay, so I'm going to move quite swiftly on, and I have the privilege and honor of introducing myself. I'm going to talk through a few stats. All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk through a few motor vehicle accident slides. I'm going to go pretty quickly through the presentation. I'm going to try and save some time. So if there's any questions, what you can do is you can email me directly, or you could email the inquiries email address. Right, so starting, I'm going to start with FEM and the construction environment. So just to put it into context, how big is FEM actually? So in terms of Building and Woodworkers International, they estimate that there's about 180 million construction workers worldwide, with 75% in developing countries. So this is firstly where we find ourselves. In South Africa itself, we have approximately, well, just over 5,000 companies. And we believe that there's probably around 50,000 in the formal sector. When we talk about the formal sector, we basically refer to people who might be paying tax. The CIDB pegs the formal sector number of employees at around 618,000 employees. And then there's two surveys that we can go by, which is the QLFS, which is a quarterly labor force survey. This is done by Stats SA. It's a household survey that puts the number of construction workers around 1.5 million. So this would be the informal sector. So in 2019, we covered just over 320,000 employees. So it puts us more or less at half of the formal sector and around about 20% of the informal sector. Now, we do provide statistics, and our statistics can be found at the website roe.fem.co.za. Once you go in there, there'll be tags where you can log on to stats and shows you accident statistics. So this screen is typically what our statistics would look like. And this is where I chose the cause as the agency. If we just go very quickly through line items, so accident type NEC would be not classified, accidents that can't be really classified. Then we have caught in, on, or between. These would be two objects, contact with electric currents, contact with temperature extremes, fall onto different levels. So these are injuries using different levels, and then fall on the same level. Inhalation, absorption, and ingestion. Those would be more your chemicals. And then what we're talking about today, which is your motor vehicle accidents, you have slips or overexertion, striking against and struck by. You would notice that the line item motor vehicle accident is highlighted, and we show you the percentage of accidents, of the total accidents. So motor vehicles are quite high, which is 12%, the highest being struck by. This is a very broad category. Then we have our fatal accidents. This is where motor vehicle accidents really come out the highest. You would see, for example, in the 2019 year, for the 56 fatalities we had, 30 of them were as a result of motor vehicle accidents. The lost days, so we work out that, we work this out according to what we pay in terms of the temporary total disability. So how many days was the employee not at work? The number of accidents, pretty straightforward in each category, and gives you a total number of accidents for the year. And then we also classify permanent disabilities not resulting in a pension. So this is more or less when the guy can go back to work, and permanent disabilities resulting in the pension. This would be something physically wrong with the individual, and he might not be able to go back to work. And then the last column there we have is the average cost per accident. So these stats are available to everybody. You're welcome to log on to those links and have a look at the stats. And they do go into a lot more detail than that. Okay, so coming back to motor vehicle accidents. So what I've done is I've isolated the motor vehicle accidents against the total number of accidents. And I looked over a 10-year period, so that was 2010 to 2019. I did not include 2020 stats in, number one, because 2020 is not finished, so we won't get the full picture. And number two, being COVID, the stats will be a bit skewed. So I've used the 10 fullest years I could find, the closest ones to us, that will be 2010 to 2019. If we look throughout the years, you would see the number of motor vehicle accidents to the total number of accidents is more or less around the 10% range. If we work out the averages, you would see that the percentage of motor vehicle accidents to total accidents is 11.28% over that 10-year period. Now, if we start looking at the fatalities, even though the accident was 10% to total accident, or 11%, the fatalities on the other end are much higher. So this would tell us that the accidents are much more serious. So for example, in 2019, we had 30 of the 56 fatalities, which were related to motor vehicle accidents. And all the years are pretty similar. So the average of motor vehicle fatalities to total fatalities is about 50%. So that's very concerning and a very high figure. Coming back to claims costs, now this is where it affects companies on the whole. So if we look at the average cost of accidents over the years, if I look over those 10 years, we have the average cost of accidents at 27,402 Rand. And the average cost of motor vehicle accidents, which is almost double that throughout the years, which is sitting at 58,000 as an average. To give you an example, last year, for example, was 69,000. So motor vehicle costs are extremely high. Now, what I did is I took the motor vehicle accidents. This is over a period of 2009 to 2018, and I analyzed 378 fatalities over these years and tried to break it down into the leading causes of motor vehicle accidents. So firstly, the two bigger areas we see there is the collision with one or more vehicle or object on a public road. So that sits at about 36.5% of all of those accidents. Where the driver lost control, we're sitting at about 27.5%. Now, this is where you'd have things like fatigue playing in place. And we know that from construction sites, especially with guys working out of the metropolitan areas and traveling back for the weekends, a lot of them leave early, they're tired. So a lot of those factors will play into this area here. Worker run over on public roads. So it again speaks to our public and not necessarily just on construction sites. That's 16.1%. And then worker killed due to mechanical failure or defect. This is where we would look at things like brakes or tire bursts. I'm going to unpack a few of these in a few other slides moving on. And then worker killed by moving plant, that's 4.2%. We do have accidents where we don't have sufficient information or don't have enough information, so we put them into an unclassified category. They're not very high figures. And another big area is flag people, when flag people are working on the roadside. So we looked at that total of 378 fatalities, 6.3% of that was attributed to flag persons killed while on duty. And amazingly, I think one of the things we see a lot in South Africa is our bakkie builders and transporting workers on the back of bakkies. But it contributes to a very small percentage in terms of fatalities, which is 0.8%. So that could speak to various things. It could speak to the fact that people that are registered, and remember, again, we're talking about the formal sector when we talk about FEM, in terms of the formal sector, they are following the rules. Okay, now, if we unpack moving plant fatalities, so I've further analyzed the plant fatalities, and bearing in mind that we do not do a full accident investigation, we have to go by what we receive on the employee's report of accident. when it comes to plant, you could look at two motions. You could look at the forward motion of plant, and you can look at the reverse motion. Now, why a difference in the two is because in terms of the reverse motion, there's higher probabilities of blind spot. So this graph speaks to that, where we had a total of 16 fatalities between those 10 years attributed to plant fatalities. And in terms of the run over, the reverse motion was 43.8% of our accidents. The forward motion, 18.8%, and where plant turns on the side. So it could be operators not understanding vehicles or vehicles being used in unsafe places. And then we also have, in terms of plant, because this is such big equipment, struck by, which is 18.8%. So these could be various accidents where plant is carrying, or crane accidents, accidents like that. So just to give you, this is something that we used in previous presentations. It's an actual incident that happened, and this is how we receive it. So this is what's written on the employee's report of accident, verbatim. So the operator of the roller, Mr. X, stated that he drove past the deceased whilst she was standing on the sidewalk drinking a cold drink. He drove back soon afterwards when he heard screaming and stopped immediately. He looked around and got off the roller to find the deceased behind the roller, and it seemed that she was severely hurt. He then went to inform the supervisor on site of the incident. So this is obviously speaking to the blind spots now in terms of plant. It's also speaking to the way people take for granted that you have these huge machines and they will see you, which is not also the case. We've had incidents where people were behind plant, fallen asleep behind plant on sites and got run over. When we come to flag person fatalities, so there was a total of 24 fatalities measured between 2009 and 2018. Of the flag people, moving plant once again factors in here, where they hit the flag people on side. Minibus taxis, we all know our minibus taxis is not very regulated industry. And we found that 8.3% of those fatalities were attributable to minibus taxis. We did not have sufficient information on 4.2%. And the big one here is hit by member of the public. Now, this is a twofold thing where we don't have the best driving records in South Africa, but also in terms of training for flag people, that is something we need to see. So I've just brought up a slide, which it's an older slide, but it talks to road deaths in South Africa over the previous 10 years. Over 10 years, sorry, between 2007 and 2016. And if we look at the slide, you will see that it was more than 134,000 lives lost over a 10-year period. And it's quite split between pedestrians. So pedestrians make up a very large portion of accidents. Well, there's an unknown portion there. And then your drivers and passengers in terms of fatalities, and cyclists in the more recent years, 2015, 2016. Also, we have a tendency to abuse alcohol and not follow rules, and we have made the list, a top list, in 2015 for the percentage of road accidents, accident deaths involving alcohol. We about 58%, so it's nothing to be proud of. Fatalities due to mechanical failure. So from what we pick up on the employer's report, so there were 23 fatalities measured between 2009 and 2018, 13% of which were brake failure, and a very, very common one is tire burst, which was 87%. And we find that a lot of these accidents occur at high speeds, they occur on the national roads, and ultimately in fatalities. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. And just in conclusion, so in terms of health and safety, there should be an attitude of compliance. I think we should be looking at training a lot more, and not just for the legal reasons, but our higher moral obligations. I think we need to get off those alcohol lists, for example. And just to reiterate, training and education are certainly key. And that's it from my presentation. Okay, now we're going to move straight on. And next up, we have Eugene Herberts. Eugene is the MD of Master Drive. So I see he's all prepped already. I'm going to hand straight over to you, Eugene, who will take us through driving behavioral trends with a view to eliminating MVAs in the workplace. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity of being able to share a few thoughts with members here. It is really challenging to see the time that we're facing, but I would just like to start off with a note of gratitude, really. We can sit here in our offices, we're employed, and my thoughts go to those many others who aren't employed and who face adversity. So when we look at the privilege that we have, I would like to see that we can address what I'm going to talk about in a slightly different context. Safetember, and I think it's a noble initiative, coincides very nicely with what starts tomorrow for the Transport Month. It's an event that is celebrated or commemorated every year, and we see the fatalities ongoing, and therefore we would like to do something about it. I'd like to delve directly into the screen to start sharing with you and give you an opportunity. Okay. If I can just introduce this part of the discussion with the fact that I would like to look at the opportunities that arise for the future in a very positive light. And whilst we are in the midst of doom and gloom with regard to COVID, we mustn't forget the important role that health and safety in the bigger picture plays. And from my perspective, driving safely is a critical issue because people fail to understand that it has implications far beyond the initial incident that we have. When speaking to behavioral change, it's very optimistic to believe that we can eliminate it entirely in the workplace. But I would like to focus our discussion on the fact that it deals with one of the key values of FEM, which is ethics. I also sit on the board of an NPO called the Road Ethics Project, which I'll show you just in a moment. And a lot of what we do and our behavior on the road has to do with ethics. We'll unpack some of the issues that impact on it. And I'm going to challenge your thinking processes because this is not just about normal motor vehicle accidents that I'll be talking about. When we have a look at the mission of FEM and the vision, and you'll notice I've highlighted there in the top section, the mission 1, to promote health and safety and accident prevention. In the broader terms, is it an accident? We've got Craig as one of the participants there, I see. We can debate whether it's a crash or an accident, but I think for the purposes of this exercise, we'll talk about accidents, but in most instances, they really are a crash. Vision, health and safety. So if we're championing health and safety in the work environment, we want to do that with the support of many others. We're fortunate, and I was introduced to FEM by Arrive Alive, and it just so happens that we've shared the same mantra, as it were. Master Drive as its mantra, Arrive Alive with Master Drive, and therefore we partner with organizations that choose to make a difference on our roads with regard to road safety. In the bigger picture, the information that we have available comes as a result of various NPOs. The Road Safety Partnership South Africa. This is an offshoot of the Global Road Safety Partnership, which is based in Geneva. We're their South African representatives. I sit as vice chairman there. There's the Road Safety Foundation, where we drive initiatives to change driver behavior. And then, of course, the Road Ethics Project. And if I share with you, almost anecdotally, the founder of it, it's Dr. Lee Randall, came to see me about 12 years ago and said she wanted to know how we can change driving in amongst the taxi industry. And I made a comment which was really off the cuff at the time. And I said to her, you know what? Most taxi drivers are actually better equipped than you and I. Now, I know most of the participants will laugh at that, but on a lighter note, anyone who can drive a taxi with the vice grip as a steering wheel must be pretty good. it's not the driving skills that they need, it's how they engage with other motorists that's the challenge. That led to her taking her PhD, and today we have the Road Ethics Project. If you've ever seen or viewed any of Simon Sinek's TED Talks, he speaks about the why of business. And as we unpack our discussion this morning, I'd like to look at why we do things. People know what they do in business. They probably know how they do it, but why do they do it? It's a mantra that we've adopted, that we choose to make a difference in a way that we can measure. 1 day, 1 kilometer, 1 life at a time. And the way we do that is by looking at incidents, and this is information from FEM, the factors that contribute toward bad behavior on the road. I just would like to highlight one of the areas over there, and if you have a look at, I've highlighted inexperienced. The IAM in the UK, which is an organization that's been advocating driver training for many years, indicates that for a driver to be experienced, they need to have covered 100,000 miles. Now, if you look at in South Africa, typically, not under COVID, admittedly, vehicles or drivers would have covered about 2,500 kilometers per month, which would put it at around about 30,000 kilometers per annum. So that would take 5 years to get them close to the equivalent of 100,000 miles. Now, if you have a look at the number of drivers when they get their license, the amount of time available for them to gain experience is very limited. I'm also going to unpack in a moment the K53, but considering what the future holds for us by way of auto, we need to remember that in many instances, and there is a positive side to it, let me just share that with you. If you're obeying the law and doing all the right things, it's not going to negatively impact on you. So the intent is good. However, we know that many organizations fall way short of the standards that are needed, and those are the companies and drivers who will face heavy penalization as a result of it. I'm not going to unpack it. We run training courses on it if you'd like to engage with me to identify what your organization can do to ensure that you survive its implementation. Hammond made mention of the costs of crashes, and here's a figure of it's up to 32% of the initial cost of the insurance claim. And we sit with a figure, if you took his 58,000 Rand as an average cost, you multiply that by 32, you're sitting at around about a 1.8 million Rand. So it's really the unforeseen or unseen costs that make it so bad. So let's now have a look at what makes our roads so dangerous. In front of you, you'll see a Boeing 747. And we know that according to the Department of Transport, we're killing something like 15 to 16,000 people per year. It's horrific. I think if the true facts are known, the Medical Research Council has done some statistical analysis, and they counted bodies in the morgue, and they came as a result of that to a figure of about maybe 25,000. So the true nature of and the severity of what we experience is not fully known. But if I can just take you to the next step over there, this is equivalent to a jumbo jet crashing every 10 days. Now, you must admit that if a jumbo jet crashed every 10 days, the authorities would do something about it. They would question the pilots, they would question the safety protocols, etc. But we managed to do this on an ongoing basis with very limited intervention. So it's up to you and I then as organizations to ensure that we change driver behavior. Now, in the following 3 slides, we look at human, we look at vehicle, and we look at road conditions. But these are figures taken from around, I think, 2010 to 2011, and it's the 2 years in comparison. Whatever they are, though, please look at the fact that irrespective of the fact that in the following one, they talk about vehicles, and in the following road, how much of that is human? If you have a look at roads, surface slippery when wet, yes, we know vehicles skid off the roads. But if that person were driving, taking cognizance of the condition, with his vehicle in the right conditions, the tires well looked after, would there be an incident? So I'm 90% convinced that when we give international figures that crashes, accidents probably are caused 95% by human behavior, it is true. And therefore, that is the one thing that we can move on. There are, however, 5 steps in the process that we need to look at. I'm going to start off with the first one, which is behavior. We have to build on behavior by changing the attitude of drivers, making them aware of what the true conditions are, be it of the road, the vehicle, or working conditions. We have to then motivate them to change. And the primary way we do that is by introducing a skill. It's not as simple as seeing it in those individual cases. They do tend to work together. And therefore, when we look at the definition or the factors that contribute toward behavioral change, I draw your attention to the final paragraph, and it speaks about it's something that's acquired or learned, in brackets, and then based on previous experience or exposure. That then leads me very clearly to the number of things that we must consider in determining how we change. There's a subject called risk homeostasis. I'll unpack that for you in a moment. Risk ignorance, the role of technology, and I'll discuss a taxi cab study that was done in Germany. Behavioral drift, a driver risk index, a danger thermostat, what role telematics plays, and then of course what the future holds as far as autonomous vehicles. Because many are of the opinion that when autonomous vehicles come into play, road safety will be something that is automatically going to sort out. There are factors, and I'll share with you the dangers that are inherent with that, but the intention really is to look at what we need to do to change things. If you have a look at, I've introduced a word here which may be new to you, it's called schema. And under this heading, I would like to examine K53. If you look at the top picture, there's an oops. One of the challenges that we find with regard to K53, it's intended or it's designed to teach people the actions and answers to questions that they need to do in order to get a license. As a result, therefore, very little learning takes place. They are processing, if you'll see the top picture on the left-hand side, they're processing information with regard to what they need to do in order to qualify, because getting the license, of course, as we know, is a passport to getting a job. They load all this information, and as a result, they develop a schema. And if you have a look at the definition of a schema, it's a way of organizing information and thoughts and behavior and the relationship that goes between them. And if you have a look at my next favorite subject, I spoke about it, taxi. And if we consider how it's describing the interrelationship. Now, on the one hand, we as observers may look at taxi drivers and we see them there pictured in the top right-hand corner. They are an ilk all on their own, but truth be told, I'm sure none of us would like to be in their position. It's great when we see it in that situation, but notice what and how the situation changes. The schema that we note and that forms the opinions, going back to K53, that driver carrying passengers, besides the fact that they're not compliant with COVID, there's no seatbelts that are worn, their following distance is non-existent, they cut through the yellow lane. So therefore, when a driver, a new driver, goes for his license, what schema or what relationship does he carry in the back of his mind that those behaviors are acceptable? And unfortunately, under the present system, there's nothing like driver's ed that re-educates them in a positive way so as to change that schema. And if these are the type of things that you deal with in terms of new drivers entering the field, there's massive gaps in experience. I shared with you what the IAM had to say. Gaps in memory, gaps in confidence and fluency, and the most important one, where the knowledge has been arranged in a format that creates misconception. If you look at a younger driver today driving their fast GTI, RS or something similar, they believe they're invincible because in the process of their mind, they haven't really worked out the dangers and all the things that are running simultaneously through those processes, because driving, as we'll see later, is 85% mental. It's not a physical engagement only. And the sooner we learn how we change driving behavior, the better it is. Speaking of COVID, we noticed that in the 5 months of lockdown, we started working for essential service providers in the beginning of May. But by the time we got onto the road and we got people coming in for training, June, July, muscle memory was gone. Really, their driving standards were terrible. And therefore, we anticipate and can anticipate a number of crashes as a result of the lack of confidence that people have with regard to their driving ability. Not only that, the more experienced drivers show less tolerance to those who are making errors and mistakes. Personally, when I got back on the road after 6 weeks of not driving, I found I was driving at 100 kilometers an hour, and it felt very quick. And it wasn't long before we were up to the normal speeds. So it has contributed to, and we anticipate that hopefully with some adequate inductions, we can change the outcome. Some of you may have heard of Smead's Law. Now, as traffic has grown, and we anticipated around the world that traffic density will increase to the point where you look at India and some other parts of the world, the situation is untenable. One kind of assumes then that as a result of increased traffic, we start seeing greater incidents of crashes, etc. This study done in 1949 shows the relationship between the increased number of vehicles on the road and fatalities. And we look at what the science tells us. In 1950, you see the number of vehicles that were on the road. It was basically one vehicle for every 11 people. Fast forward to 2010, 34 million vehicles. Now, you can appreciate or anticipate that there are going to be greater incidents of fatalities. But what do the facts tell us? So there was 5,000 deaths in 1950. So what do we anticipate the increase would be by the time we get to 2010? We see an actual reduction, only 1850. Now, I know that in the UK, the manner in which they handle fatalities, there are consequences, not like in South Africa. The person in charge, the ministerial portfolio, just gets moved to another position. So Smead's Law teaches us something very interesting. It's not the increase of traffic that causes fatalities. There are other factors. And one of the factors is called risk homeostasis. Now, for those of you who have not heard of risk homeostasis, I will just walk through a very quick definition of it. It's a subjectively estimated risk that everybody has with regard to their health and what they're prepared to do in exchange for the benefits. Now, if I was standing in front of an audience, I'd be asking the audience to put up their hand and say, excuse me, who smokes? And there's a few hesitant hands normally that would come up and say, yes, I do. And when I would ask, and I'll ask of you that same question, if you do smoke, why do you smoke? And typically you will answer, well, after a meal, or I enjoy it, it gives me some satisfaction. And yet, if I had to ask you that same question as to whether or not you know that it's dangerous to your health, you'd probably agree. So you can see the correlation. In exchange for the benefits, the enjoyment, they're prepared to exchange a certain value. And that, of course, has impacts when we look at driving, the use of cell phones, for example. We know that it's legal, but not safe to use a cell phone hands-free. Why do they use them? Well, they can talk about engagement, they can postpone appointments, carry on important conversations, and get the job done. But there are risks that are taken into account. Now, when you look at the risks, the driver typically will look at it and say, well, if I make a phone call, what are the risks? I could have a crash, I could be caught, I could be fined, but what are the benefits? And this typically is something that's going through people's minds on an ongoing basis, which causes them, in some instances, to show ignorance. Now, if I can use smoking as an example, because I mentioned it earlier, we look at the fact that in the early years, people were really ignorant with regard to the risks. Doctors thought smoking was cool. Pregnant mothers felt it was cool to be able to smoke, something they craved. And then, of course, the science in that time showed that it was safe. In those circumstances, we can rightly reason that they were ignorant with regard to the risks involved. But today, doctors are advocating no smoking. Pregnant women do not agree or should not be smoking. And then, of course, the science tells us that smoking kills. So how does that relate to something in a practical environment that you and I have to work with? Having a look at the use of seatbelts, for example. Today, people will still refuse to wear their seatbelts. It's the one important part that should be non-negotiable on any policy. Now, you'll notice in the definition on the left-hand side, it relates risk ignorance to risk arrogance. And this is where an individual is of the opinion that they do not need to do something because they know better. Now have a look at the fatalities over there, and you'll appreciate why this is one of our fundamental keystones that we build around any safety program. What about technology? And I'm quite sure you'll all agree that part of the reason, with the increased number of vehicles on the road, that we've managed to reduce fatalities is because of the introduction of technology. There you will notice some of the things that we see today. And for those of you who are fortunate to drive vehicles that have these, I test vehicles on a regular basis for one of our magazines. One of the most significant systems is adaptive cruise control. It really is phenomenal. Now, I found that challenging. You drive a vehicle like this, it's got all this technology, and then you get into a rental vehicle when you fly to another destination. And you know what? It doesn't have it. And before you realize it, you're riding very close, and if not, just missing a crash with the vehicle in front of you. So technology has its advantages, but notice what there is. This was a survey that was done by the AA, or the AAA Foundation, in 2020. People who have these assistance systems, and in certain parts of the world, it's mandatory from a period of time that these systems will be in place. They overlook the safety limitations on vehicles that suggest something is automated. We see it in our training, you know, ABS, we take it for granted. In fact, it is probably one of the greatest safety features, which, here's an anecdotal comment, by the way. If you think about it, ABS was invented during the Second World War for aircraft, and we have the benefit of it today. Now, ABS is there so that in an emergency, you can safely brake while steering. What do motorists do today? They think it's okay to go off the off-route of a highway at full speed, knowing that they can brake and turn at the same time. What happens if there's a failure? What happens if there's an incident of another vehicle cutting across the road in front of them? This is not taken into account. Talking about the role of technology, and we spoke about ABS, a study done in the 80s in Munich, they were estimating, or the purpose of the study was to determine whether this technology reduced crashes. Now, in this instance, you'll notice there was no reduction in accidents, but the driver's target level of risk changed. What do we mean by that? Well, you can imagine, and any good driver looking at the instrumentation in his vehicle will know when ABS is working or not working. If the light is off, it's fine. If the light is on, we know that it's not working. But when you start up, it will run through that program. They fitted some of them, or some of the vehicles had ABS, others not. So clearly the driver knew whether he had ABS or not. They did a survey amongst the passengers that occupied the vehicles. And you know what they found? Typically, the drivers who had ABS fitted to their vehicles drove more recklessly. Their overtaking was a bit risky, harsh braking, harsh steering, and a number of questionable maneuvers made the passengers feel unsafe. So does technology work? Clearly. But if the driver is aware of the fact that it has benefits, he may push the boundaries. And that was clearly evident in this particular case. How do we measure, though, that driver in their change over there? There is a program, it's Driver Metrics in the UK, Cranfield University. They've got a fleet driver risk index. I'd like to play the short video for you, and then you can actually have a look at the factors that we should be taking into account when we assess behavioral risk. Okay, so if I to describe what the Fleet Driver Risk Index is, it's really a psychometric test to assess the individual's appetite for risk. And if you look at the report on the following slide, you'll notice the factors that it looks in, and it divides the drivers into various categories. Now, typically, many people believe that a driver, because he can control the steering, change gears, put the indicator, doesn't abuse the clutch, and knows how the brake works, he's a competent driver. Would you believe it that typically 70% of the drivers that we assess fall below a reasonable standard? There's all sorts of reasons. We go back to K53. I think the last statistics I got from DOT was that about 50% of the drivers' licenses had been obtained in a fraudulent manner. So clearly, every second driver that you and I encounter on the road, statistically speaking, can't drive. If you had to analyze their performance and you start looking at all of these factors over there, work-related risk, fatigue, confrontation. Now, interestingly, if I can just put up the arrow over there, I want you to have a look at the difference between situational risk and behavioral risk. If I had to ask any of you, and I'm quite sure many of you have done some type of advanced driving course, what is the correct following distance that you should have behind the vehicle in front of you? And I know I'm going to get answers to 3 cars lengths, 3 arrows you may see on the highway. But when I ask the question, so at what speed is that? Clearly, there's some fault in the reasoning. So giving you the answer, it should be 3 to 4 seconds. Now, situational risk, you're driving on the road, a busy highway, at the N3 or something like that, and you keep your following distance at the normal speed limit. So from a risk perspective, you're okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You're awake. Now, what may happen, going back to our favorite vehicle, the taxi cuts in front of you. And of course, if you follow the principles of defensive driving, you're going to back off to keep your 3 seconds. But imagine this, another one cuts in, another one cuts in, and a third one cuts in. And finally, you reason, why must I keep letting them cut in and you now close the gap? Do you notice how your situational risk has now changed because of your behavior? So you've increased your risk exponentially, and the likelihood of you crashing into that vehicle in front of you if they slam on brakes is that much greater. So we should understand, and this is what this testing does, we understand the behavioral patterns of drivers that much better. But in order to do that, we now need to get into the heart of the matter. Or let's rather talk about the brain of the matter. And if you have a look over there, you'll see all the things that are going through the brain. Now, this is happening constantly whilst we're driving. The 3 areas that I would like us to focus on, and the last one is what we should be engaging in when we want to change behavior. The occipital, so we're talking about the functional areas. The occipital lobe is that which controls vision and perception. You may have looked at a crash incident on occasion and wondered, well, that's a head-on. Didn't that driver see that other vehicle coming on? If that were faulty, the occipital lobe, that lobe enables us to distinguish the difference between a car coming toward you and a car going away from you. So do you appreciate the important role that it plays? The second area that is also critical is the cerebellum, but that's quite easy. That's part of what the muscle memory will develop over a period of time. Balance, coordination, how to change gears, etc., etc. And that you can learn on a simulator, and eventually it'll become practice. That can become schema. But the most important one, if we want to change behavior, is to get through to the frontal lobe. Now, that is where, in the broader terms, you talk about executive decision-making takes place. And you'll notice the difference between an experienced driver and one who is not experienced. If you're driving down the road, and the most simple example I can give you is you see a ball bouncing down the driveway. As an experienced driver, you look at it and you make the connection. There could be a child following. So you're going to do one of 2 things, 3 things, come to a stop, change direction, slow down, or something like that. The inexperienced driver hasn't as yet made that connection as to the fact that there could be somebody following that vehicle. So now you'll appreciate when we speak about changing behavior, that's the area that we've got to focus on. It's not physical components, although it forms an important part. Haddon's matrix helps us to understand how important this is, because if you have a look at it, it's broken down into pre-event, event, and post-event. And the area that I'm more concerned about is the one over there in the personal factors. There is equipment, and it's been identified as there are causes, physical, environmental condition. But the one that I'd like us to just look at very briefly is driver skills, driver's attentiveness, and sobriety. Now, you remember when I spoke to you, those wheels and the cogs that came in the first instance, skills was part of BAMS, behavior, attitude, awareness, motivation, and skill. So clearly there is a skills shortage, and somebody who's got their license after spending 2 hours behind the wheel does not have the skills that's needed. So in the bigger scheme of things, and I made mention of this figure earlier, 85% of what we do is mental when we're driving. Only 15% is physical. So if we're going to change things or make an effort to equip people better, we have to work on that which is the mental component. Is telematics the answer? It was once thought that it was the silver bullet, and we notice this when we're engaging with customers on occasion. No, I've got telematics. And by the way, I think there's something like 800 providers of telematics in the country at the moment. And if you haven't got your vehicles equipped, you should be looking at that. There are a few reputable ones that we work very closely with, because we find that we can use that data to change drivers' behavior. But typically, these are the factors that it's built around in order to get driver scoring systems. And I must just give you a heads up, for a pretty good driver who is aware of it, these things are easy to not cheat, but to figure out how they work, and therefore, as a result, get a typical good score. Personally, I'm of the opinion that they don't work very well in contributing toward road safety. The ads from the insurers that say make you a better driver, they make your score better. But if you've been behind one who's so intent on keeping his score right that he pulls away, the driver, pulls away so slowly that it creates impatient drivers behind who are on the hooter wanting them to get moving. Or when they approach a turn in the road, they are so slow because they don't want that harsh braking incident to occur. So please, if you're using that, I'm not saying it's bad, but be very subjective about attaching a value to it from a safety point of view. That information was done, by the way, the research by Dr. Lisa Dawn, and I sent out an invitation for an event we're hosting tomorrow. She's a guest speaker. She's at Cranfield Youth University doing driving research over there. Now, when we start looking at telematics and do they contribute toward changing behavior, here's an interesting slide. And I think it's fairly recent, 2015 or something like that. If you have a look, 38% of people who are using telematics, their driving hadn't changed. And 38% indicated that small change. So yes, it does help, but there's no scientific proof at this point in time that it changes behavior over the long term. The reason why we can say that is that in some instances, the telematic system, and this refers to cameras, etc., relies on the psychological principles. And if you've heard about the Hawthorne effect, the effect of observation and the effect of feedback, this may be having an impact on the driving behavior without changing it necessarily. And if I gave you an example, if I'm a competent driving instructor by your standards, and I took you out for a drive, and my assessment of you would depend on whether or not you got a job with the company where you make an application for. I guarantee you're going to drive in your best behavior. But is that our true driving style? And if we were left to see for ourselves, we probably wouldn't score as well. So we drive to impress in many instances, and that is what the Hawthorne effect showed. And in assessing, that's why behavioral psychometrics helps us to get a good understanding. What about the danger thermostat? Now, I've got permission to use this video, so let me run it through and you can have a look. It's a few seconds. Now, clearly what's happened over there, the driver has fallen asleep. He's probably having microsleep. In one instance, we know that a driver slept for a period of, I think it was 8 seconds. Now, if you take a vehicle traveling at 60 kilometers an hour, traveling it covers 16 meters per second. How would you like a big truck to be covering that distance with the driver out of control? Now, the danger thermostat, what this tells us, that a person is prepared to engage in risky behavior to a certain extent, and they have a target risk, how much risk they are prepared to accept. So now, when that is set, we need to change that to show that it is unacceptable. And if you really want to get you thinking, have a look at these statistics around fatigue. We demonize drinking and driving for every reason, and it's the right reason. But lack of sleep, and organizations are encouraging their drivers to work for 17 hours a day. Their driver, the attention span of a driver is such that it's equivalent to 0.05 grams of alcohol BAC level. So behavioral change comes about not only as a result of getting the driver to change, but companies who drive policies. We speak of autonomous vehicles. I mentioned at the outset that this is seen as a solution. So moving forward, and by the way, we're not even going to be talking about platooning, which in the commercial vehicle context, by the way, I've got a presentation on autonomous vehicles on these things, which help us to get an understanding of what the future holds. So here are 5 dangers that we've listed. Now, besides the points that we will discuss in a moment, there's 3 things that we would need as a country in order for autonomous vehicles to work efficiently and effectively. The first one is 5G capacity. Is it likely that we'll have 5G capacity around the country? Not for the foreseeable future. What about a stable power system? I'm sure that all will agree that this is very debatable as to us having that. And then, of course, the third thing is that vehicle connectivity must be of the highest level. So unpacking these 3 things, an unregulated industry, there's very few limitations internationally as well that govern how vehicles who are autonomously driven are able to engage with other vehicles. And that brings us to point 2, more accidents, blending self-driving and manual vehicles. Now, looking at those first 2 points, I think you may have heard of the trolley effect. Now, vehicle design for autonomous vehicles has grown exponentially, and there's great things that are happening. But consider this, no vehicle has yet been designed or been given a conscience. And by that we mean, if the vehicle was driving down the road and it had to choose what it should do in order to protect the driver. If there was a lamppost, clearly the decision is simple. But what happens if it was a group of school children or there was a single adult standing on the road? Which decision would it make? Could it make that? And this is the moral issue that hasn't as yet been finalized or sorted out. The other thing, or the third point, vulnerability to hacking and remote control. I'm sure we've seen the movies where this happens, but last year, I must just share this with you. I went for a medical checkup, and my doctor, we were talking about pacemakers. Now, this is anecdotal. It comes from him. I haven't done any research on it, but it's worth sharing. And he said there was a case in the United States where a family was taking the hospital or the medical aid company to court because of the failure of the pacemaker. It was their opinion that it had been hacked and that it was responsible for the person's death. I understand that soon after that, directive went out to the organizations who manufacture this type of technology, pacemakers, with regard to ascertaining what their security protocols were. So clearly it has great potential for problems. Computer malfunctions, I think there's it's like 1,000 computers in a vehicle today. Now, when you get to trucks driving on the open road, can you imagine 50 tons, 60 tons gross having a malfunction? And then, of course, the second last thing, exposure to radiation. You and I, this vehicle that we're sitting in is pumped up with so much technology. And from an occupational health and safety perspective, we need to consider, what does this mean for the driver that's in control of the vehicle? Just as we do not fully understand as yet the dangers of cell phone usage, we don't fully understand the dangers that are associated with all this technology built into the vehicle. And then the final point over there, it speaks about this metal container. All of these things, electromagnetic frequencies, causing an increase in radiation. That's a summary of that. So now, where do we look at getting to the COVID situation? I do trust that many companies have got strict protocols in place. What we did when we opened, we ensured, and there was a bit of irony in it, and I'm sure you were affected by it as well, that you had to deep clean your facilities that had been closed for 6 weeks. According to the experts, the virus lived for up to 14 days at the time. So clearly there was no threat of the virus being in the facility. But of course, in order to be compliant, you needed to do that. But beyond that, what we found in engaging with organizations as we started delivering training is that they were very limited with regard to their knowledge. Abroad, they were very proactive with regard to educating drivers. Now, remember, drivers out there on the road, they were at the forefront. They were delivering goods, medical emergencies, etc. And one of the organizations or one of the industries that we delivered training to was for telecommunications. As a result of that, you and I can engage in these types of interchange. Sadly, many organizations are lacking. So what we did, following the example of some overseas partners, we provided, and it's available to you as well if you want, a free COVID-19 driver training course. We made that fully available, free of charge, so that at least the drivers on the road, in their space, that's their workspace. Occupational health is critical. So that is available to ensure that they can go about their daily tasks with due care and consideration. We also made available to companies that were battling, clients of ours, a free COVID preparedness course, a kit that gave all the regulations, the diagrams, etc., etc. And if there's anybody out there that would like it, we're happy to make it available, because the more we can positively do to change the outcome of this pandemic, the better it will be for everybody. And then finally, what we did, we created a pledge. It's on our website. If you open up the homepage, you will see it there. And this is our pledge: hands, face, and space. I did plagiarize that from one of the international news companies because it's something that we advocate. Please, we encourage you to share it freely, because the more people that engage in doing that, the better we are. And my concern, and we've seen it already with us moving to level 1, many people are inclined to think that this pandemic is gone. And therefore, in open spaces, you will see that they're shaking hands, they're hugging, and they're doing a number of things. For our publication, I mentioned earlier, and if you'd like that article, I'll happily share it with you. One of the partners, or one of the other directors in the Road Ethics Project, lives in Soweto. And he wrote an article about what is happening in Soweto. And it's almost saying that even when there was level 5, there wasn't a level 5. People were serving food, hot food, restaurants, etc. So we urge you and encourage you to treat this seriously, particularly in the driving context. But one of the programs, a webinar we did the other day, some companies have seen the greater need for health and safety protocols. And if that's the case, it's commendable. Some, however, have lost the plot with regard to road safety. They determine, or motor vehicle crashes, COVID is critical. But what's the point of saving somebody from COVID and they ride out there and have a crash? So from our perspective, if I can just share with you, it's a bit of a sell. We spoke about in the BAMS context the importance of having skills developed. And here's a typical model that we look at. And right down at the bottom, policies and accident review. Most companies will have policies, and I'd like to introduce something to you in a video shortly afterwards, that dictate whether or not you can use cell phones or not. They have policies, with regard to driving hours, etc. But some don't. We have a program called MORE, Managing On-Road Risk. And if anybody would like to consult, there's a free consultation. We can help them develop these policies to the point where we make a difference to those people who are in the cab driving on the road. But the other things that we see that are critical is understanding the nature, the behavior of the driver. You don't have to go to the full route of a psychometric profile. There is one available. We also offer that, by the way, so that if we understand the driver's appetite for risk before we put him behind the vehicle, the wheel of the vehicle, we could probably save ourselves some money. And yes, in the process of COVID, we introduced virtual training and e-learning. And I'm not sure how we'll do this, but Herman, if you want to have a look at it, I'm quite happy to donate 6 free e-learning programs to organizations. It'll 2 hours of the driver's time, but I do trust that it could make a difference. And if that helped a little bit in making a difference to our roads, I would be happy to contribute it. So how now do we enforce our policies? I'd like you to have a look at this, because what we're doing from the 1st of October, we looked at the incidence of distracted while driving, and it accounts for something like 25% of crashes. And policies may say that you cannot use your phone, but we know that people bribe the traffic officer if they get caught. So what can we do? We've now launching this program, and I'd like to run it through for you.
Did you know cell phones are the #1 cause of distraction for fleets? They account for nearly 47% of all distracted driving crashes, and on average they cost your company $92,000, potentially climbing to millions. The solution is no-cell. No-cell is the industry-leading hardware and software hybrid solution to enforce your company policy. No-cell is fully customizable for any fleet size, industry, or operations to maximize the balance between productivity and safety. How does it work? Your administrator can manage these settings for devices with permissions and access. Whitelist apps to balance safety with productivity. When the no-cell tags are permanently installed in your vehicles, and your drivers have no-cell installed on their devices, you're ready for no-cell to enforce your customized policy when your vehicle goes into motion. When the trip is complete, no-cell stops enforcing your policy and you gain full access to your device. View a wide variety of comprehensive trip data in the no-cell portal. Fleet administrators can view individual trips and non-compliance alerts. What makes no-cell the industry leader? Here's what you get. Scales for commercial fleets of 2 to 10,000 plus vehicles. Authorized apps to balance safety with productivity. Work seamlessly with in-cab cameras and telematics systems. Alerts for phone handling and unauthorized devices. Effectively prevents crashes and saves money by proactively removing cell phone distractions. Keep the road safe. Protect your drivers and your company assets.
The reason we introduced that is because I'm tired of seeing people drive in cars, a cell phone plugged to the ear, and that, by the way, is they've got Bluetooth, but they still insist on using the vehicle, because remember, there's 3 factors that contribute toward the dangers of distracted while driving, and certainly cell phones. 1 is hands off the wheel, 2 eyes off the road. That can be up to 5 seconds. And then the third component is the brain's cognitive capacity. It cannot simultaneously handle equally important tasks or 2 tasks at the same time, and therefore it's going to give way to one or the other. And that's one of the reasons why we have these major problems. I shared with you the importance of skills. Person, if they experience something, and if I can just share with you what we do in some of our training, if you ask a person typically how long will it take a car to brake from 60 kilometers an hour, generally, and we ask them to show us, they talk about 5 meters or 10 meters or something. When you actually demonstrate it and they realize it's closer to 30 meters, suddenly they change. Now, when we give people a skill, it helps them to understand the limitation of their experience and that of the vehicle. We talk about experiential training. And I'd just like to conclude with this short video on showing how experiential we are able to get. The one program, you see it's in our Master Trucker program, we saved one company's costs in 1 year, 80 million Rand. Quite incredible. Have a look at it, and then I'll share the concluding comments. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was a welcome to my world. It's an exciting world. We do make a difference in people's lives. We see accident reductions of up to 50%, but more important, we see the effects of somebody not being engaged in a life-threatening situation. Please, I hope you have benefited. If you'd like any more material on any of the subjects specifically that I discussed with regard to risk homeostasis, etc., I'm more than happy to share it with you. And I'd like to hand back to Herman.
Thanks for that, Eugene. It was really, really interesting. I have one question for you in the interest of time. So I'm going to ask you to give me your best possible answer in the shortest possible time. So the question is, are financial incentives effective in driving behavioral change?
Absolutely. And I think the sooner companies realize that there's got to be benefits, and I'll give you an example. One of the costs that we reduce is maintenance costs on a vehicle as a result of better driving. So the company saves, let's say, 20,000 Rand in the year. What incentive is there for the driver to save the company that? So why not give him part of that, whether it's 10% or 20%? You know, I've always reasoned that I'd rather have 90% or 10% of something than 100% of nothing. And that applies to your fuel calculations, etc. So please, if you want assistance in working out a formula, I'm happy to engage at the level that we can help you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. And we will put up your contact details. Can people just contact you directly for the no-sell and Master Drive programs?
Yes, please. They can go to the website, www.masterdrive.co.za. My email address is on there. They're welcome to call me as well. And we'll do our best to assist.
Fantastic. And also thank you for the 6 free e-learning programs. I didn't forget that one, but we will.
Yeah, figure out how you want to use that, all right? And if we can help, I'll be happy.
All right, we're going to move swiftly on. And next up, we have Jacques Erasmus, who's the National Health and Safety Manager for Frankie, part of the Keller Group. So Jacques is going to talk to us around MVA prevention measures, and he's going to give us a real live example. Thank you, Jacques.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you, everybody. And good morning to all out there. And thanks for joining us on our Safetember initiative. I'm going to quickly just see if I can share my screen here with you. Great. And yeah, I just want to quickly talk to you about some of the prevention measures that we've implemented in the construction industry. And really from a perspective that we've got as a contractor in the construction sector. Yeah, so really, I think prevention here is key. And as Eugene and everybody, the previous speakers have mentioned, you know, it takes your sort of perspective from where you come from as a company and what your approach would be towards accident prevention and motor vehicle safety. And I want to give you really a brief overview, more as a sort of case study of where we come from as a company and as Frankie Africa, what we've been through and how we've reacted to an incident that occurred 3 years ago. And when I thought about, you know, chatting to you about this morning, I thought about this quote that we can't really choose where we come from, but we can choose where we go from here. And to give you an idea of where we come from, 3 years ago on the 4th of July, at approximately 6:10 in the morning, early morning, 2 of our vehicles carrying some of our colleagues to a project near the Nkomati nickel mine were involved in a terrible road accident head-on with a truck on the R541 towards Mashara Dorp in Mpumalanga. And some of you that might know the area with near Mbombela and Nelspruit, it's a fantastic part of the world, really. But some of the notorious roads with respect to road accidents in that area, sort of 100-kilometer radius in and around the valleys around the Ngodwana Valley towards Nkomati, the mine at the bottom of your screen that you can see there. And it was believed that this truck driver, again, like we know, traveled for long hours, hardworking guy, but happened to fall asleep behind the wheel and drifted over into the oncoming traffic and collided with one of our drivers that had 16 passengers in the vehicle, with head-on collision and a second vehicle into the back of him. And unfortunately, this is the sort of picture you get on the scenes that resulted in 18 fatalities and another 14 injuries. Now, really, what I want to mention around this is that I don't want to dwell on the tragic side of it, which it really was, but some of the positives that come out of our response as a construction company from an incident like this. And I briefly want to touch on some of the immediate initiatives that you can take as an individual, but also as a company, and not necessarily only in the construction industry, but in any industry, really, if you have a fleet of vehicles operating out on our South African roads. Obviously, we responded immediately with assistance to those affected and the families. There was counseling involved to those families and even our own employees that was on the scene of the accident that morning. And memorial services and funerals and everything that goes with a tragic accident like this. But really some of the positives that came out of this accident was setting up a memorial education fund to assist the children of the deceased in getting them through primary, secondary, and even tertiary education for the years to come. And another positive really is we sat down immediately as a group, a worldwide group, and decided to review all our transport policies and have a sort of future outlook of what we want to achieve going forward, at least for the next decade. And that included things like Eugene mentioned, advanced driver training, IVMS or in-vehicle monitoring systems, telematics installed on our complete fleet. And I must also, last but not least, on the slide mention the assistance we received from FEM through this claims process was absolutely fantastic. Every year, sort of on the 4th of July, we commemorate this incident, but we also try and put a positive spin on it, and we try and look at all the lives we're touching going forward. You know, these are some of the children that have already started benefiting as beneficiaries from our fund that we set up. A lot of them, as you can see, are youngsters in primary or even preschool, and we hope that we'll see some benefits from this fund for years to come. But really, what did we do as a company in detail over and above just training? We took a look at some of the accidents that we experienced over the past 10 years as a group and realized that actually driving forms a massive part of our key risks as a company. And we looked at things like working platform safety, slip, trips and falls, and all those categories that you saw on earlier presentations of work-related accidents. And again, it ties up with the golden thread that I see here this morning, that nearly half of the accidents were actually related to either going to a site or coming back from a project and driving related accidents. And we further broke that down into 3 subcategories that we try to focus on, and that's wearing of seatbelts, which is mandatory, obviously. And then those distractions that Herman and Eugene both spoke about, you know, cell phone distractions, things happening on the road while we travel long distances, etc. And then one key aspect that we've identified was the actual road conditions and traveling to projects. And something we have to include in our administrative controls is actually some sort of risk assessment where you look at if your project is located on a high risk route, that you take that into consideration when assessing the project risk. Long-term initiatives, obviously our partnership with Arrive Alive and initiatives like Master Drive, it's really, again, this morning just reiterated what a fantastic initiative these guys have out there. The support we get from FEM that also facilitate claims through the Road Accident Fund and things like that. And then the awareness we try and create around road safety, and to try and get that to a broader audience or a more global audience, we started producing some animated videos in collaboration with Arrive Alive to try and reach the bigger audience. And on mobile or social platforms like Twitter, for instance, we reach over 190,000 subscribers. And then I can only encourage you really to start contributing to these initiatives, but also take a look at what's out there on the net. Master Drive is a great example, constructionsafety.co.za, and even links on the FEM website if you are looking for material or places where you can contribute. Now, one of the videos that we initially developed with Arrive Alive was mainly focused on driver fatigue, because that's where we obviously was the root cause of this specific incident that I mentioned earlier. And I want you to just take a look at this and see if you can relate really to what is on this short video.
Driver tiredness and fatigue is a killer on our roads. Too many rollover crashes and head-on collisions are caused by drivers falling asleep behind the wheel. Signs of driver tiredness include struggling to keep the eyes open, yawning frequently, and slow reaction times. A tired driver may also wander across the centre line and drift across other lanes, over road markings, or follow other vehicles too closely and have trouble remembering the last few kilometres. Stop and rest before it is too late. There is no quick fix or miracle remedy. Our bodies simply need to rest. Most adults need a minimum of 6 hours of sleep per night. When we don't get enough sleep, our brain cells do not communicate effectively, which in turn affects our visual perception, physical reflexes, and memory. For your own safety, always start your journey refreshed and well rested. To remain alert and focused behind the steering wheel, plan your journey and your rest stops. After 2 hours behind the steering wheel, or every 200 kilometers, find a safe spot and take a break from driving. Stop, refresh your body and mind before continuing your journey. Let's share roads safely and responsibly. Visit the website arrivealive.co.za for more information on road safety and preventing driver tiredness.
Great. I trust you enjoy that. And just a brief word maybe on the recent UN resolution that was signed that they call the Decade of Action. I mentioned that we had a sort of 10-year plan going forward, proactively trying to reduce road accidents in the construction industry. But globally, I think the resolution recently signed focuses on getting member states to basically encourage or look at risks such as the non-use of seatbelts, child restraints, wearing of helmets for motorcyclists, alcohol, driving under the influence, as well as speeding. And it's great to see that things like this are being enforced, especially on the African continent, where they further look at mechanisms to reduce MVAs, or specifically the fatalities. But more the focus that we as a company had to focus on the professional drivers and the impact of incident caused by commercial vehicles, and then the related fatigue of spending hours and hours on the road. So you might have to ask yourself here to this morning, what can you do? But really, what you've got to do is sit down and assess your company's current status quo and get some buy-in from your management firstly. Look at all the initiatives that were shared this morning through Master Drive and all the others that are out there, and then implement some of those, but firm up on the policies and take a hardline approach to monitoring those and enforcing them. You will see the benefits from that. I'm not going to spend too much time on the training aspects, but really that is really important to get your drivers competent behind the wheel, and look at the training programs that are out there for even your general workers. This morning, we're speaking to a large audience in the construction industry. If your foreman or your people are transporting vehicles to a project, have a look at whether they are competent drivers and have experience to do so. And then also mentioning the legal compliance aspects in terms of our construction regulations 23 and how that relates to the actual vehicles on site. Again, the awareness around it is really important, and I think that's where something like this morning's Safetember campaign plays a vital role. Frankie has been part of Safetember now for at least since 2015 from the start, and every year we just see a growing interest in it, but also a bigger focus on safer roads. And then discipline. Unfortunately, all the vehicle monitoring and all the policies, at the end of the day, there is still a disciplinary aspect involved. But you will probably want to use that as a last resort. So really I can only encourage you to become involved. A lot of these controls that you do see are administrative. So if you look at the hierarchy of controls, unfortunately, they are administrative in nature. But you can look, as I mentioned, at high-risk routes, for instance. Include that as part of a overall driving risk assessment in your company. If you don't have something like that, we'll be glad to assist you with that, and you can contact me after the webinar today. We've got lots of material available. Also, with respect to what was mentioned earlier this morning about flag person training and the importance of ensuring safe controls actually on road projects. A lot of the construction companies operate on infrastructure projects and road building. You want to have a look at your training for flag persons. And then the traffic management plans for those projects obviously also of vital importance. Small things that you can do as a safety officer or whoever out there in the construction industry include safe driving and safe going home at night safely as part of your daily safe task instructions or toolbox talks. And then incident reporting, I wanted to just touch on briefly this morning. Really, if you do not investigate small incidents, again, like with any safety accident, you're probably going to be open to more serious things happening in future. So try and find the root causes of smaller incidents, and hopefully the 80-20 rule will apply and you can have a successful campaign. One other video which I just quickly want to share with you, which was one of the follow-ups more specifically related to the construction industry, was this little video. So take a look. so really the idea behind the videos was it's an easy way to get a message across. There are sometimes language barriers and literacy issues, which especially in the construction industry, we all face. And we found that these things are a great initiative to create awareness around road safety. And then, as mentioned, these are available to share. If you want to contact me afterwards, feel free to have those on your site. So really, in summary, where we've come from and where the outlook we've got, it's still a work in progress. But I repeat my motto at the bottom there: we can choose where we go from here. And I think all of us can make a positive contribution if we get involved and really just partner, as we're all fighting the same battle. And I thank you for the opportunity this morning. Thank you, Evan.
Jacques, thank you so much for that. It's really nice to get firsthand experience from our peers and to see what works. And yeah, thanks for that silver lining through that tragedy.
Only a pleasure.
So you lucky that we don't have any questions, but we're also way over time. So I'm going to call on Ndebo to close officially and to do the thank yous. So Ndebo.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Herman. And I'd really like to just thank our speakers for today for the very heartfelt and insightful information that you all provided. As we have responded in the chat, this webinar is being recorded live and it will be available on FEM's new website, www.fem.co.za. I think just a couple of closing remarks from myself. I think it's been quite clear in terms of all the presentations today, the importance around focusing on motor vehicle accidents. And obviously, Jacqueline also spoke to COVID-19, which is all consuming at the moment. But I think even as we navigate through COVID-19, we must not lose sight of the fact that there are so many hazards that face employees within the construction space. And while we focus on COVID-19, we cannot take our eyes off ensuring that all of these other hazards are also dealt with and that we minimize the risk as much as possible. And we save lives. And I think it is something that we definitely can do collectively. Health and safety is not a competitive advantage. So I would really encourage that if anyone has got some great ideas and thoughts in terms of how we can continue to tackle the scourge of motor vehicle accidents, please do share that. Yes, the presentations will be made available. So I wish you all a great day further. Please stay safe and healthy and focused on health and safety. Thank you.
Take my hand, will you share this with me? 'Cause darling, without you, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky,